Happy holidays from the Varsity Locker Room podcast with your host Frank Hill and Matt Tabler. Welcome. Wow, what a great week of week 3. We are going to introduce week 4, but here we are. It's the holiday season, and we're talking about high school sports, high school boys basketball. And, Matt, you and I both have experienced, this holiday season. It's exam week for most high school teams. And the reality is, it's never normal. And what's normal is not normal for most coaches. And, we get to this week of going into the final break of exams. And you and I, as coaches, it's always so unpredictable. And when it comes unpredictable, it's like, what do you do to keep things on schedule? And you as a coach, how would you plan for this week with exams, next week with Christmas, the following week with like New Year's Eve and New Year's Day? In most teams, and there's a couple teams that actually have a few games on like January 2nd. How do you go about planning on these things?
Well, you got to keep it as normal as possible, because if you're comfortable, the kids will be comfortable, and you're just trying to get this week out of the way. And unfortunately, some teams are playing 3 games this week. You talk about the exam schedule, half days, assemblies, the anticipation of Christmas, and all those things coming up. But you're trying to get out of this week because the next 2 weeks are awesome. Because basketball,
get out of this week. Yeah. How do we get out of it?
You just got to get out of it, because once that's done, it's just basketball and that's it. I mean, you have no school, you have a free day. Usually we practiced in the morning, but it's just one of those things where you kept your routine as possible as you could, just like staying in that routine.
Keeping things normal.
Yeah, keeping things normal is the word I was trying to search for. But it is anything but normal at school. But we talk about how important is basketball to you. Don't run with the people that are going to be causing ruckuses around the school and everything like that. So it was just a lot of talks to make sure that they stayed focused. We never did like a study table for the exam or anything like that, but we're just trying to keep it normal.
I know it's something that you and I really haven't talked a lot about, but 3 years ago, this Friday on December the 20th, you and I lost a very, very close friend, Aaron Matthews. And this is a guy that, like, I'm throwing a curveball at you because, like, it's not something you and I talked about beforehand. But Aaron Matthews was one of those guys that always kind of provoked you and I to start this podcast. He always talked about being the, producer. I'll get you going. I'll get you set up. And then Aaron Matthews leaves this earth.
Yeah.
The impact that Aaron Matthews had on your life and my life, you can't even describe it. And at the end of the day, when it comes to people that are influential, how do you describe a guy like Aaron Matthews?
Well, we talk about it with our basketball teams in the Thanksgiving time and the Christmas time to make sure that you hug the people you love and tell them the people you love, because you don't know how long you'll have them. And unfortunately, Frank, you and I have both lost our fathers, and we don't have that anymore. But getting to Aaron Matthews, he did so much for high school sports, and in particular high school basketball, and even more in particular you and myself. He was so influential in the media world. It was great to call him friend. I still consider him a friend. I miss him dearly. It's just one of those things. It's a tough time, especially around the holidays and with his anniversary of his upcoming death. It's one of those things that you have to celebrate his life because of everything he did for high school sports.
And I think high school sports, and I think high school athletes, they really appreciated a guy like Aaron Matthews, because he made high school sports and high school athletes feel like they were superstars. And for you and I can say this dearly, he wasn't in our circle. He was in our corners. When you talk about a guy who had our back, and, here we are, talking about, our Varsity Locker Room podcast, he was a guy that was very supportive of who we were as not only human beings, but coaches, as friends, but guys that really mentored high school sports. And I think what you and I talk about on a week in terms of like helping high school athletes become who they are and what they want to be, it really comes down to making sure the importance of who things are in life. And we talk about our fathers, and our fathers were most important in our lives, and they were very, influential. Aaron Matthews is a guy who had a lot of impact on announcers and broadcasting and what he did for, Wolf Boom Radio, a few years ago with the 104.9 The Eagle, WOSN and sports. You and I he was a guy that really embraced us as coaches, and not just you and I, a lot of coaches. And, and a lot of times we take those things for granted, and where we go in sports, it's all about relationships. And this week we talk about relationships and about, who's, the best players, and we just make them feel important because that's what's all about.
Yeah, the only nick he probably ever had was he was a Kansas City Chiefs fan, and we were Browns fans.
I can still got Chiefs fan now because of him.
Well, you're every fan because you have everyone's hats and jerseys and everything. So I don't know truly who you are, Frank. Yeah. All right, let's get into the show.
Well, we're going to recap this games of the week, the game of the week, previews of games, players of the week, and also, review the over-under from last week and look at the who's hot and who's not. But recapping week 3 of high school boys basketball season, the scoreboard recap is sponsored by Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, professional realty. Let's find your dream home. See Dalton Brenner for your real estate needs. Deal with Dalton. Look, Friday night, you and I both covered games. The biggest game on the schedule that you and I picked was Delphos St. John's at Minster.
We messed one up. I was calling us gurus because we got the first 2 games so close in our games of the week, and we were kind of building that Delphos St. John's and Minster game up. On paper, it looked really good, but Delphos St. John's dominated that game. They built a 40-19 halftime score to cruise to the victory. They won 73-49. I got a chance to talk to Coach Elwer after the game, and he said it was probably their best defensive effort this year because we had talked about how many points they were scoring, but how many points they were giving up. But one of their main things going into that game, Coach Elwer said, is to win the rebounding war, and they won that rebounding war. So, they checked off those boxes. That in a combination of with Minster's best player. By the way, he was named Division VII Offensive Player of the Year in football. Brogan Steffi's still fighting an injury. He did not play. I don't think that mattered that night. Even if he did play, Delphos St. John's was that dominant.
Well, you talk about the Blue Jays, and during our MAC, preview, it came down to Delphos St. John's and Minster, 2 teams that you and I both said, they could finish 1 or 2. You made the prediction that there will no be undefeated team in the MAC. I'm telling you what, the way St. John's is playing right now, they have a very good chance of being undefeated.
Well, I think last year being 7 or 9-0 in the league is just uncharacteristic of the MAC, and it shows how dominant Delphos St. John's are. And you've talked about it; they are still the champ until someone knocks them off. I still think there might be a chance for a team in the MAC to knock them off. I'm sticking with that. Obviously, I'm sticking with it.
If I had to be a gambling man, I like the fact that there's going to be an undefeated team, and I'm not a gambling guy because the MAC is so competitive. And we saw, like on Friday night with Delphos St. John's and Minster, on the road at Minster, Delphos St. John's really controlling everything. But again, I think that goes back to the best player in the MAC. Yeah. Cameron Eller is a guy, scoring 26 points, that night, along with Andrew Eller of 14 points. Here's 2 kids scoring 40 points. 40 points, when that's a big like pot of points for 2 guys really dominating. Well, dominating.
It's a combination of success, and that's going to continue throughout the year. Cole McClure led the Minster Wildcats with 15, and James Niemeyer had 10. Well, that wasn't the game of the week, but we had some pretty good games that we talked about leading into it. One that was really good was a Bath at Van Wert game. Bath was 1-2. Van Wert was 1-3. Bath hadn't won a league game last year. Van Wert was only win was against Bath in the league, and it started out 13-0 Bath. And the score ended up 43-41 in a barn burner with Bath. They sealed the game with some free throws. But Van Wert didn't score their first basket until 3:30 in the game. Have you ever had those games where you just can't put the ball in the basket no matter what you throw up?
And you know what? As a offensive-minded coach, you and I, defense, offense, like You got great plays, great sets, and unfortunately, the ball won't go in the hole. But I'm telling you, the Bath Wildcats is a team that's turning the corner a little bit. When I say a little bit, you look at a guy like Logan Markley, who had 19 points against Van Wert Cougars, with Dagan Hawkins, 11 points, but really Jackson Foster, a kid who's kind of coming on. And I got to watch him last night, a couple nights ago, Bath versus Temple. Here's a kid that just is really he's a senior coming into his own. And with Logan Markley, shoots the ball very confidently. And I watched this kid, Logan Markley, he's really coming into his own, really growing into the scorer that he is and taking all the defenses. But to go on the road at Van Wert to get a WBL victory, that says a lot about Dre White and what he's building defensively.
Well, I also look at their experience because actually Van Wert, Griffin McCracken hits a 3-pointer to start the fourth quarter, and that was Van Wert's only lead. But after Bass started up 13-0, Van Wert kept chipping away and actually took a lead 32-31. The Bath of old would have folded. And you got Coach Dre White leading you. You got Coach Cook, Coach Young. You got all those guys on there, plus an experienced team. Like you talked about Logan Markley, but you had Dagan Hawkins, the point guard, had 11. Jackson Foster had 9. You alluded to those. Those guys have that experience, and that's what I give Bath credit for, not folding when Van Wert keeps chipping away throughout the whole game and actually takes a lead in the fourth quarter, but Bath makes enough plays, makes free throws down the stretch.
Well, you talk about free throws. It's funny you say that. At the time, until December 17th or whatever it was, Bath only had 3 guys, and I say this, Logan Markley, Jackson Foster, and Jaden Ryan had only attempted the only free throws for the Bath Wildcats.
For the entire season?
Entire 3 to 4 games that the Bath Wildcats had really played, only 3 guys had attempted free throws. So down the stretch, these guys are the ones taking the free throws, but to be able to convert those and really to pull out a victory on the road says a lot about the Dre White kind of program that he's building over there at Bath. And I love it because I watched it last night. You saw the defensive intensity up the line, on the line. You saw the communication. You saw guys really going at it hard defensively. It's kind of something you and I hadn't seen in a few years from the Bath Wildcats.
Well, and then you look at the youth of Van Wert. You get 2 freshmen that lead you in scoring, their first WBL game, and that just shows the future of Coast's best program. You got Xavier Kelly, led the team with 13 points, Zach Crummy with 12 points. Van Wert's going to slowly get there. They got great leadership, but that was a great game. And then there was not so great games. You talk about
games.
You talk about Elida at Shawnee game, a game you guys covered. Good first quarter. It was a good first quarter, a 6-point difference. Shawnee kind of ends the first half on a little run to build a little lead. And then they proceed to outscore the Bulldogs 20-2 in the third quarter. And I watching the game back on replay, Shawnee extended that 1-2-2. Now they're going 3-quarter court, and they use their length. And even when Elida had opportunities to break it, they closed so fast on shots that it just made it difficult for the Bulldogs to score.
Shawnee is a team that's really reckoned with right now because they're a team that's just building on momentum. We talked about being down early against LCC, being down early against Crestview. I'm telling you what, the Shawnee team that came out at home after playing 4 road games, against really good competition, came out with a sense of a purpose against the Elida Bulldogs. And, a guy led by Beckett Berkey, 27 points. Jagger Hutchin hit some big threes for 11 points, but Trevick Berkey, 11 points. These guys really are coming to their own. And you and I talked about the old days with the George Mangus mentality of the 1-2-2 press, back into a kind of 3-2 half-court zone. They're really stepping up their defensive intensity, and they're feeding off of their defense.
Well, I think this is the Shawnee team we expected from the get-go.
100% agree.
And for them to survive a few of those games at the beginning shows the resilience. They were way out of games. They came back and they won, but against Elida, they showed who they are and what everybody was talking about. Elsewhere, we had another ugly game up in Defiance. Some people would call it ugly. Some people would call it a defensive struggle. I think it was like a 10-6 score at halftime. But Defiance ended up pulling out a victory at home over Walpock 32-26. Defiance was led by Josiah Schleiter with 19, and Ryan Richardson from Walpock had 12. Okay, St. Mary's at Salina. Salina won this one in the Battle of Grand Lake St. Mary's. Salina won 47-42. Salina was led by Gavin Wickers, 16 points, and St. Mary's Brendan Stager with 20 points.
We also had Springfield on Thursday. We forgot they beat a good Findlay team 46-33 on the road. You know, it's the high school boys basketball. You can never predict when it's going to be. So we have Jefferson at Bluffton. Jefferson goes on the road, takes a big defeat at Bluffton, 84-50. Blake Summers with 31 points. Merrick Donaldson with 20 points and 21 points. And Jefferson is led by Gavin Howe. Crestview, big game. I know, Matt, you called this. Crestview at Spencerville. Spencerville is a great team, tough team to beat at home. A very competitive game. Spencerville got out to a first quarter lead, 17-4. That's a tough, like really uphill battle if you're on the road and trying to come back. But thanks to Grady Smith and Jude Steeman's threes, kind of, really provoked, Spencerville to get that early lead. But Spencerville, they had some great they had great contributions from Owen Sensabaugh and Grady Smith. They were really kind of leading the way. But tell us a little bit about that game, Tabes.
Well, when you have the big three, and we talk about Owen and Will Sensabaugh and Carter Orr, when they score 3 points in the first quarter, you would expect Spencerville to be getting beat. But when you game plan to guard those guys and kind of give Grady Smith and Jude Steeman open threes, and they knock them down, that shows how deep that Spencerville can go, that they can put 5 weapons out on the floor and to build that 17-4 lead. Actually, Crestview closed the gap to 27-20 at half, but Spencerville led about 8-12 the whole second half. And like you said, Owen Sensabaugh led Spencerville with 19. Grady Smith had 12. Ren Sheets only had 12. They did a good job defensively. I thought Carter Orr did a tremendous job guarding him inside. And in the guard for Crestview, Tommy Hefner had 10. One score we missed, and we have to talk about this in the WBL, was don't beat OG. Don't let OG go 0-1. And don't let Tyson McLaughlin, the head coach, get a week and a half to prepare, because Kenton just felt the wrath of that as OG Titans knocked off the Wildcats 66-21. Elsewhere in the Northwest Conference, we had Lincoln View. They were hosting LCC, and LCC's return to the Northwest Conference, and it was a close game. It was a 41-31 game at halftime, but LCC was dominant with Jordan Pretty with 32 points, and they ended up knocking off the Lancers 84-55.
And in the MAC, we got Versailles at Parkway. Versailles wins 52-27. Versailles had Jace Watchern, 19 points, and Blake Monin, 13 points. And Parkway was led by Trevor Stearns, 11 points. Also was St. Henry at New Bremen. St. Henry comes up with a big win on the road, 56-49. And in our NWCC, we got Ada at Riverdale.
This is actually the BVC. Ada's in the BVC.
My apologies. Wow.
Yeah. So, Ada was at Riverdale, and they beat them 37-32. Ada was led by Carson's Conley's 13 points. Arlington continues to roll as they beat Van Loo. Elmwood beat Macomb in overtime, and Liberty Benton, when we talked about this game could be a good one, was at Lipsick and defeated the Vikings 61-47, as well as Van Buren staying undefeated in conference play with a 58-20 win. All right, PCL
action. We got Ottoville at Fort Jennings. Fort Jennings goes, they stay home with a 50-45 close win. And then Kalida at Holgate. Kalida wins on the road 57-18.
As well as Continental played at Fairview, and Fairview knocked off Continental 46-38. But we talked about this kid in the previews for Continental. Monty Rail had 22 points, 6 steals, but they just came up a little short versus the Fairview Apaches. I was going to say,
I got it.
Where are they at, though? Where's Fairview High School? What's the town called? Come on. You know this.
Fairview is
no, I don't need
Nay?
a road. Sherwood.
Sherwood. Yeah, well, they
Fairview.
also share Nay.
All right, now I know you were so excited to talk about the Northwest Central Conference, you skipped over the BVC. Why don't you lead us into the Northwest Central
Well,
Conference?
USV goes on the road at Corey Rawson, gets a big win. And then you got North Baltimore at Hardin Northern. Hardin Northern wins 56-25. And then Ridgemont at Perry, a team that I've seen a lot lately, but Ridgemont goes on the road at Perry and wins 72-42. And Ridgemont made 5 threes in the first half. Ridgemont was led by Xavier Stucks, 12 points, and Heppert's 11 points, but Perry was also led by Boss Horrison, 13 points, and Amar Warner, 11.
Yeah, Amir's that freshman that we're talking about that's playing real well. You forgot to mention in the Hardin Northern, Xander Wilson had 19 points for the Polar Bears. All right, Temple at Waynesfield Goshen. This is a big rivalry game. And our friend Bruce Bowman, he is so awesome. He'll text me knowing that we both have games. He'll send me a text and kind of give us on how the game went. I know he was pretty excited about this. Big rivalry game, like we said, over at Waynesfield Goshen. Waynesfield Goshen turned the ball over 17 times. The game was still tied at halftime. Waynesfield actually took a 2-point lead after 3. And then with 46 seconds to go, the Pioneers hit a 3 and sent it to overtime. And Temple was victorious 45-43. Kind of the story he said was in overtime, Waynesfield was down 3 with a chance to tie in overtime. They missed a shot, and with 1 second, they rebounded, got fouled. They made the first one to make the 2-point game. They missed the second one on purpose. And Temple has been doing it all year. They've been rebounding the ball well. They secure the rebound and the win. Temple was led by Derek Schultz with 13. And Waynesfield Goshen was led by Glick with 13 and Kaufman with 11.
Okay, you talk about missing shots on purpose. Have you ever in your coaching career missed shots on purpose?
Never. Like I said, we're always outmanned. Well, no, I take that back. We did one time. And I got criticized by some people in my family. It was a 2-point game. It was a 2-point game against Shawnee, and I'm coaching Perry, and we had one more shot to shoot, and there was 0.8 on the clock. Do you make it or do you miss it? And since you already asked me, do you ever miss a shot on purpose? I told the kid to miss it. Now, 0.8, they got to catch it, throw it the length of the floor. They don't have any timeouts left.
Right.
They have to throw it the length of the floor in the hoop.
Yeah.
And you would win. Okay. But the chances of that, as opposed to making the free throw, going up 3, now they can take the ball out of bounds. They can throw it like the length of the floor, catch and shoot.
Yeah.
So we did that. My family was split. I didn't listen to anybody else.
Right.
It was a tough decision, but it was a decision that I stuck with because the chances of a guy making a 80-foot shot and catch, shoot, okay, as opposed to I've been on the end when we played Crestview when I was at LCC where we threw it the length of the floor, even though LCC was on the good end of it, we caught, shot, and made one at the buzzer.
Well, I just remember in 2014, here we are playing in the state championship game. Villa Angel St. Joe, we're up 2. And Ron Williams, one of my longtime assistant, Segerson's assistant, says, hey, I think we should miss it. I'm like, Ron, if we make it, we tie, the worst that could happen is that they tie shooting a full court. They don't have any timeouts left. But why would I tell a kid to miss a shot to potentially, they could tie it if they shoot a 75-footer? I'm not doing that. We end up missing it. And Brian Parker from Villa Angelo St. Joe catches the ball with 5 seconds left, shoots a 80-foot shot.
Front rimmed it.
End of the rim. And you talk about gut wrenching. Like if that goes in, we lose.
Yeah. And that's a state championship game. Ours was like game 4.
But as a coach, you're always constantly coaching these guys and, hey, do we make it or miss it? You know what? As long as it comes out to your benefit, it really is.
That's why I'll never lose sleep again because I'll never have to worry about that because I'm never coaching.
You and I both.
Elgin at Ridgedale was the last one in the Northwest Central Conference, and Ridgedale was victorious 56-36. The Spartans continued their annihilation of their league.
Dominance.
And I like the quote that Coach Simpson said in the paper. It doesn't matter who the opponent is. A win is a win, and they're all hard to come by. And yes, on paper they were favored, but these are high school kids you're dealing with. They hear outside noise. They read social media that they're supposed to win by this. Then you start to get in your heads, I want to score this amount of points. And then you don't stick to the plan. And before you know it, you're not going to win a basketball game, or you're going to be in a game that you shouldn't have to be. And so I thought that was a good quote by Coach Simpson. They handled the Scott Bulldogs. The Bulldogs, 86-38. Jaquel Cotton led Lima Senior with 20 points and 3 more threes. Willie Foster had 17, and Sean Foster had 16.
And moving on to Saturday, Marion Local at Salina was postponed because obviously Marion Local just got done with football, so they need a little bit of practice time. We have Defiance at Bryan. Defiance beats Bryan 53-38. Riverdale at Kenton. Riverdale wins 56-45. Moving on with Shawnee at USV, a team that I had the opportunity to cover, Friday night and then Saturday night to see where it really, did they match up, fairly? No. Shawnee just dominated from the get-go. Shawnee's Beckett Berkey, we had 29 points. He had 17, and I think 17 points in the third quarter. He had 14 straight points. It was unbelievable. It was almost like an NBA Jam like video because he just went off against USV. He had 29 points, 6 rebounds, and 5 steals. USV was led by Bo Sanders. Bo, very competitive. He's a 6'1" kind of post guy. Really does a lot of things. Just got in between the zones of Shawnee, but Shawnee really just led from the beginning to the end. It was running clock halfway through the fourth quarter. But the one thing I appreciate about Shawnee is that you could see the progress. And I watched them, with the Tip-Off Classic to where they're at now after, 5 or 6 games. Here's a team that's really progressing. And I said it earlier, they've played from behind against the LCC, the Crestview, went on a road against St. Henry, finally has 2 home games against Elida, against USV. You could see the comfortability coming out. And I think that's the progression that Shawnee has. You and I talked about the WBL match, who's going to take the lead. I don't see Shawnee losing this lead whatsoever.
Well, I mean, it's, if you were going to get Shawnee, you probably should have got them early because they're starting to click on all cylinders. OG went over to Indian Lake and lost 62-51. Kalida turned around and played Van Wert, and we talked about this young team of Van Wert, how they're going to continue to get better. They knocked off Kalida 57-44. Van Wert was led by Griffin McCracken's 14 points. Keaton Welsh had 14. Zach Crummy had 13, and Xavier Kelly had 12. Again, those freshmen are scoring points, and that's big for the Cougars. Okay, we also had Liberty Benton at Walpock. Tyler Gross led Liberty Benton with 25 points. Jake Gherkin had 23. They totaled 67 points to Walpock's 37.
Woodward at Bluffton. Again, another domination by Bluffton. Blake Summers with 21 points. Merrick Donaldson, 15 points. And Kane Wright, 12 points. Bluffton just really annihilates 79-18 at home. So a good win for the Pirates.
4 guys in double figures because Taryn Boblet also had 11 points in. Blake Summers had him a weekend, 31 on first night against Jefferson, 21 the next night. I mean, that's a big weekend for him.
Columbus Grove gets their first kind of opening, really kind of initiation to boys basketball after kind of a long stretch of boys football, going on the road at Arlington. Arlington wins 58-46, so a good showing for the Bulldogs, but Arlington was led by Calvin Willow, 20 points, 20 rebounds.
That's our 6'10" boy that we just
6'10".
He never said heights, and then I find out how tall he is, and then I start to remember back. He was playing in Coach Powell's AAU program at one time, was very raw, but I mean, 20 points, 20 rebounds. I know.
We got to get our eyes checked.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Arlington,
Trent Ramsey with 21 points, 8 rebounds for the Bulldogs, but you're going to see the growth and also the struggles from the Bulldogs, and to open up on the road at Arlington, that's a tough first initiation game for the beginning of the 24-25 season.
And it doesn't get easy for Grove as they're going to be taking on Crestview this weekend. Speaking of Crestview, they had a bounce back game after getting defeated by Spencerville on Friday night, and they went over to Wayne Trace, and that's not always an easy bounce back game when you go over to Wayne Trace and Haviland and play. And Crestview was leading 11-10. Yes, folks, I said that right. Crestview was up 11-10 at half. And Wayne Trace missed 4 of 8 free throws in the final quarter. The reason why I bring this up is Frank's going to talk a little bit about this story, but they missed 4 of 8 free throws in the final quarter, and the Knights knock off Wayne Trace 31-30.
Well, you talk about just missing the free throws. In the last really 0.2 seconds, the game went from being you're up 2 to tied to down 2, and then there's a foul with a technical foul for Wayne Trace to go to the free throw
So
line.
now we're at the line for 4.
For 4 free throws, you're down 2 points. So Wayne Trace is heading to the free throw line. They got one of their best free throw shooters, their best scorers. And not only that, he goes 0 for 2. And then Crestview calls a timeout. And I love the fact that Coach Etzler calls these timeouts. And again, it's like icing the kicker in football, and then, Wayne Trace comes out. They get 2 free throws. They make the first one. Doug Etzler calls another timeout to ice the free throw shooter, and he misses. And the reality is that there's 0.02 on the clock. You can't even get a shot off. It's literally a tip. And the unfortunate part is Wayne Trace loses this game at home. You have 4 free throws. You go 1 of 4. All you got to do is make 2 of 4. And with really good free throw shooters at the free throw line.
Well, obviously they're sending their best.
They're
sending their best. If it's a technical foul, then anyone gets to shoot them, and you get to pick your best free throw shooter. And again, sometimes we're seeing these 1 or 2 possession games throughout the beginning of the season, and free throws playing a huge part.
You and I talked about last week on our podcast about free throws. It's not easy. It's a simple function. It's a simple talent, but it's never easy. And you and I know what is easy is not always the simplest thing to do. And when there's nobody on the line on a technical foul, and in this situation, nobody's even on there for the 2 shots.
4, yeah.
Everybody's watching you. So for a high school kid that's 16, 17, 18 years old, it doesn't get
not easy as everyone would think in the crowd. Ottoville played at Spencerville. I had an opportunity to cover this game on WIMA 1150, and congratulations, Coach Sensabaugh got his 300th victory, and he did it in style because they had a running clock on Ottoville in the second half. Spencerville shot 60% from the floor. Through 3 quarters, they only had 1 turnover. Will Sensabaugh led all scores with 20 points, and Owen Sensabaugh for Spencerville had 19, while Landon Hortzman had 19 for Ottoville.
Well, last week we had Coach Elwer getting 250 wins. This week we have Coach Sensabaugh winning 300 wins. A lot more wins than you and I
Yes,
had.
Again, and a lot of years put into it and a lot of work away from the family. So congratulations to those coaches. Fort Recovery went over to Bradford. Gavin Evers scored 12 points, and Grant Fortman had 11 in a losing effort, 53-48, as well as Briggs Overman scored 10 points. Greenview played at Versailles. Versailles is kind of a silent sleeper that we talked about in the previews. We don't hear much coverage in this area, but they won 80-36. Russia had to play at Minster. How about that weekend for Minster? You got to play Russia and St. John's. You had them both at home. 2 very tough opponents. Russia comes in, knocks off the Wildcats 55-40. Minster was led by Cole Richard with 15 points.
I know we don't cover Russia a lot, but they had Minster on Saturday. The night before, they had Jackson Center. Tough team that we're going to see in that small school division from Russia.
Yep. Fort Loramie, another Shelby County league. A lot of these Shelby County leagues like to play these MAC schools. They went over to New Bremen, and they were defeated by New Bremen 39-30. Rogan Muther had 11 points. BVC Saturday night. In the BVC, Eastwood was victorious over Van Buren. Danbury got beat by Arcadia. Pandora Gilboa with another win over Corey Rawson, and Van Loo was victorious over Fremont St. Joseph.
Saturday, December 14th, we got Continental at Antwerp. Antwerp gets a big win at home, 44-42. Leipzig at Miller City, a big win there for Miller City. This is the 2 teams that you and I had talked previously about, during the conference previews, who was going to be good. And both of these teams, Leipzig and Miller City, both undefeated at the time. Miller City came out of, and hit their first 11 out of 12 shots
actually, Leipzig wasn't unbeaten. We thought they might be.
Okay.
Yeah, but Liberty Benton beat them the night before.
Yes.
Yeah.
But again, these are 2 teams that really had great profiles at the beginning of the year. We knew this was going to be a kind of a heavyweight match at the beginning, to start the season off. Here we end week 3, between Lipsick and Miller City. Lipsick fights back, and halfway through the third quarter, they were down 1, but 12, with 12 Lipsick turnovers in the second half was the difference. When you turn a ball over like that, it's extra possessions, it's extra opportunities, and teams that have to take care of the ball, it's a struggle. When you turn a ball over like that, it's just giving momentum to the other team. And I know as a coach, I hated turnovers. And a lot of times turnovers were kind of like extra, it was momentum builder for the other team, something that like you and I, like you could call timeouts, but turnovers come in really bundles.
Yeah, Miller City is now 5-0 in the season. Brendan Barledge had 19, Jude Otto had 14, and Jesse Lammers had 13. Leading Lipsick, they are now 3-2 on the season. Jace Brecht had 25 points with 3 threes, and Nick Schrader added 10. All right, talking about that tough Jackson center team, they went over to Waynesfield and defeated the Tigers 45-22. Crestline was victorious over North Baltimore, and Ridgemont played Kip Academy out of Columbus and won 70-59.
Parkway goes at Salina, and Parkway goes on the road to win a 42-35 matchup.
Yeah, these games were from last night, so these are ones that were fresh in our mind a little better. But sorry, Coach.
No, you're fine. And then one game that you watched last night was Allen East at Elida. Elida was down 35-30 at half. And again, we talk about this Elida team, someone that you're very close to. It's really been a struggle for me to kind of like pinpoint what's wrong with the Bulldogs. And you got, Zori Island, you got Amari Walsh, one of the premier kind of like point guards, scorers in our area. What is up with the Bulldogs?
Well, I felt like the Elida played a lot better game because Allen East is a very good basketball team.
Absolutely. I agree.
They're athletic. I thought the coach did a great job of changing from man to 2-3 periodically throughout the game, which kind of threw Elida off a little bit. They definitely shoot the ball really well. I felt like Elida they came out hot. Then they got kind of cold again. And then with about a minute and a half to go in the half, it showed the team that the Bulldogs can be. They have to consistently do that. And they hit a bucket at the buzzer, which gave them a little momentum going into the second half, came out on a 10-2 run and kind of held that lead to 4 or 5. Allen East actually cut it to 2 with about a minute to go with the ball. But Elida took a couple charges. Those charges that you said weren't happening as much this year. They took a couple big charges, made their free throws, and Zori Island played a complete game. He had 26. Amari Walsh had 18. For Allen East, they were led by Ethan Young's 18 and Brady Brooks 10. And then we had Temple over at Bath, and you covered this game. And I think this was a great opportunity because when I was at Perry, the opportunity to play a WBL school was like unbelievable for us. And then to add schools like LCC as well on the schedule. But I think this was an honor for Temple to be able to go over and play in Bath. And you guys covered this game. What did you see in this Temple-Bath game?
We talked about Jackson Foster and how he's really coming into his own. Didn't have a great tip-off, but he had 20 points last night, and Logan Markley had 18 points, 13 rebounds. Jaden Ryan, another guy that really doesn't get a lot of credit. He had, I believe, 8 points and probably close to 7 or 8 offensive rebounds. But I thought, the Bath Wildcats really did a good job of controlling the tempo, the pace of everything. Bath did a good job of really kind of going up and down, but kind of played out of control at times. And that's where I think Bath really utilized that speed and really just kind of got to the basket. But again, Bath is a team that's, they've won a couple games in a row. They've won 3 in a row, but unfortunately they got a weekend with Shawnee and Delphus St. John's.
Well, Walpock went over to Jefferson and beat Jefferson in overtime. Crestview was victorious. St. John's was victorious. Ada, River Valley beat Ridgemont, which was kind of surprising. I know River Valley's a little bigger school. Ridgedale beat Van Loo. And then elsewhere last night, Anthony Wayne destroyed the Trojans of Findlay 73-35, and Woodward, another league game for Lyman, another big win, 89-42.
All right, our game of the week is Spencerville at LCC. Spencerville 5-0, LCC 3-1, brought to you by Frickers of Lima, where now for the fall season, stop by and select appetizers half price after 9 p.m. Perfect for after games, practice, or to end a long week?
I think this is a very intriguing matchup. You got two teams that are undefeated in the league. LCC was dominant in the league when they were in there. Spencerville has been dominant in the league over the last 3 to 4 years. So I think this is a big Northwest showdown between two very good basketball teams. LCC's league win was against Lincoln View. Crestview, or Spencerville's, was against Crestview. Last year in this game, LCC won 54-52, and LCC is 8-2 over the last 10 meetings. But I see two very good basketball teams, and I think this is going to be a terrific matchup.
And I am shocked at that stat of 8-2 over the last 10 meetings, because anytime you play in a Kevin Sensabaugh team, it's always very tough. It's competitive, and you really never know what you're going to get. And I remember last year's game going down to the wire, Carson Parker taking a last-minute three, to try to get the win. But, LCC is at home. And you've got a Jordan Pretty who's averaging 26.5 points a game, with a Zod Burton 11.5, Jeff Williams 6.5, 4 rebounds, 2 assists for the freshman.
4 rebounds. The kid is 5'4" tops. That's a guy going in and getting it. I didn't mean to cut you off there, but 4 rebounds.
That's exactly what you want from a guard who's very aggressive, that says, I'm not afraid to go to the basket on both ends to get a rebound.
And then you also have Brady Parker that's at 6.5 points a game and 2 assists. And then the big question is Drew Peaster. Does he play? He was injured. We don't know the severity of the injury, but he did not play against Lincoln View. You usually have the inside stuff, Coach. You knew about Brogan Steffi with your connections probably through the Perry Corp and knowing everybody in every county. Do you know anything else on Drew Peaster? Is he good to go?
I have not heard anything other than it's not good. And, when it's not good like that, from one of your starters, he's a junior that plays with a lot of minutes. You can't replace a kid like Drew Peaster. But let's talk about Spencerville. They average 62.5 points a game, giving up 42. So they're winning almost by 20 points. Owen Sensabaugh, 18 points a game, 3 assists, and 2 steals per game. Will Sensabaugh, 17 points a game, 3 assists, 2.5 steals per game. Carter Orr, big body inside. I don't think LCC has a guy that can guard a Carter Orr. He's averaging 12 points, 8 rebounds a game, with Gritty Smith and Jaden Steeman. That's a really tough 5 guys, and LCC has their hands full, at home. And this is what you want from a Northwest Conference game, to start the season off, because these two teams are going to see each other, I think, and I truly believe, in the postseason.
Well, if you look at this, I think the big factor, they're both averaging about the same, 64 for LCC, 62 for Spencerville, but Spencerville only gives up 42 points a game, 42. And that could be a big 55. With LCC giving up 55. So I think that's going to be like a big factor. Can they guard those quick guards from LCC Spencerville? They showed the propensity to do that against Elida. But it's going to be one of those where I think the stops are going to win.
And a little side note for that game, it's going to be kind of a tribute, wear your shorts that night for Aaron Matthews.
Oh, that's awesome.
Also, it's going to be the revealing of the portrait for Vicky
Moaning
and on the press box.
And you're going to get to,
I get to announce it. And it's awesome. One of my dearest friends. She passed away a little less than 3 years ago. But again, it's going to be a great night, great atmosphere to honor 2 people like Aaron Matthews and Vicky Moaning, 2 people that I dearly love. All right, you are listening to the Varsity Locker Room podcast with Frank Gill and Matt Tabler.
All right, let's go to the conference rundown. Man, I wanted to get one in there, but you're just too quick to the draw, Frank. Conference rundown for week 4. This is the second week now in the WBL. The conference rundown is brought to you by Stolly Insurance, looking out for you and your family for over 100 years. Top-tier agents who treat you with respect and get you the answers you need when you need them. All right, WBL, here we go. Week 2, the big contest. Bath is in the big contest. They are both 1-0. Shawnee is playing at Bath. Shawnee's 5-1, Bath 3-2. But here is the interesting fact. You talked about Bath's upcoming schedule and the tough weekend they have. They are looking for their first 4-game win streak under Coach White since the 2013-14 season. That was the year they made it to the regional finals. Do you know who they got beat by?
No.
Oh, come on.
I don't know this.
Norwalk.
Yeah, the Truckers.
Well, you knew the mascots.
Because I think the Truckers went on to win state that year.
Yes, that was a very tough team, but they're looking for their first 4-game winning streak. They were defeated by Shawnee. Shawnee dominated this game. It was the first game of the year. I feel like Bath has grown up a little bit. I know their competition is probably not been as strong as Shawnee's schedule, but it's baby steps for Coach White, and he knows how to build that program.
I hate to say it, game over. Like, Bath has no chance.
Yep.
And again, that's why this is a podcast. And Coach, if Dre White's listening, I'm sorry. The only reason I say it, I think that the team of Shawnee Indians is really that step ahead of where Bath Wildcats want to be.
I feel like Bath is going to start buying in at 3-2, and Coach White's going to have a good game plan. Do they execute it, or are they just outmatched at every position? I think that's probably what you're looking at. But if they can execute a scouting report, and I'm kind of anxious to cover this game. WMA is covering this one this week. If they can kind of just stay in it in the first quarter, don't let Shawnee just come out and can they handle the pressure of Shawnee? Because Shawnee's going to keep showing that 1-2-2 where they've extended a little bit, but on paper they're both 1-0, and that has to be exciting for Bath because it hasn't been that exciting out there in a while.
I know you're trying to be really optimistic for Bath. I'm just very realistic that the fact that like Shawnee wears teams down for 32 minutes, you get through the first quarter, you get through the second quarter. If you can make it through 3 quarters and be within,
I'm slowly talking you into it.
I'm just simply
all right, let's go on. Salina's playing at Van Wert, Defiance at St. Mary's, Kenton will be going over to Elida, and Walpock is playing at OG. In the Northwest Conference, Frank, why don't you lead us through the Northwest Conference? Where's the big game in the Northwest
Alani's
Conference?
at Jefferson, Riverdale, which is not a conference game, at Bluffton, but Grove at Crestview, and then Lincoln View at Ottoville. I think the matchup is Grove at the Crestview, 2 teams that I really thought at the beginning of the year. You and I talked. I actually said Grove was going to be the top, one of the top teams, along with Crestview. I think Crestview at home, I think they're playing a lot better. They got a lot of momentum going on the road, beating the Wayne Trace team. Seeing Grove, obviously competitive against, Arlington last week. I just see Grove, really it's an uphill battle. Can you guard a Wren Sheets? And really last year, Crestview wins the game 54-43. Crestview has a 6-2 Northwest Conference, over Grove, and 5-3 last year. I just see a team like Crestview dominating at home again.
Okay, quick quiz.
No, I don't like quizzes.
All right. Who has the most wins in the Northwest Conference over the last 10 years?
Well, I think that's an easy one. I think it's Crestview.
Who has the second most wins?
Spencerville.
Nope.
Nah, that's rigged.
I'm setting it up. I'm setting this game up.
I'm simply
Who has the second most wins?
Okay, Columbus Grove.
Thank you. And it's not even close to Spencerville because you remember Spencerville went through those lean years for 3 or 4 years ago. And so these are the top 2 teams in the Northwest Conference, even though we've had some teams exiting. All right, in the MAC, we have Parkway over at Fort Recovery, New Knoxville at Marion Local, Minster at St. Henry, and New Bremen at Versailles. On to the BVC, the big game in the BVC. Van Buren, 3-1, playing at Arlington at 6-0. Van Buren last year finished 5-3 in the league, while Arlington went in a 3-way tie with 7-1. Arlington defeated the Black Knights, but it took them overtime to beat them 61-57. Arlington has won the last 6 meetings, but the 4 previous meetings, the Black Knights won those. So Arlington is 6-4.
I think this is a great victory or a great opportunity for Arlington to have a home game against a tough conference game, against the Black Knights. To me, Coach Vermillion is a guy that really does well on a Friday night games. To me, Arlington is one of those teams that you don't want to play at home, especially on a Friday night.
Well, Arlington is led by Jace Vermillion at 15.5 points per game. Calvin Willow, the 6'10" guy. I mean, he might be 7'3" by the end of this podcast, as much as I think we've given him a few more inches. Calvin Willow, he's at 12.7 points per game and leads the BVC in rebounding at 10.5 rebounds per game. And Aiden Kaveen has 11 points per game. For Van Buren, they're led by Seth Gregory's 15.5 and Cole Bishop with 11. Pandora is also playing at Lipsick and Liberty Benton at Van Loo, as well as Arcadia at Macomb. All right, moving on to PCL. Fort Jennings will be at Ottoville or at Ayersville. Kalida will be playing at Patrick Henry. In the Northwest Central Conference, Hardin Northerns at Corey Rawson, Elgin at North Baltimore, Ridgedale at Ridgemont, Waynesfield at USV, and then Perry will be playing at Temple. And then Findlay will be playing Whitmer on the 20th. And then moving on to Saturday, we have a whole host of games, some interesting matchups that we'll just talk about briefly. Coach Q has his classic. He's going to be bringing in some teams, and OG is going to be playing Spencerville at Lima Seniors Gymnasium, where it was a rematch of last year's district final game. I think that's interesting. Walpock is playing Lyndon McKinley in the Coach Q Classic. Lima Senior is going to be playing Clay in the Classic.
That game got rescheduled, I believe, for at a later date.
The Walpock Lyndon McKinley game?
No, actually, the Lima Senior game.
In the Clay game?
Yeah.
Oh, yep. Just because of Ohio State playing that night. Okay.
LCC at Van Wert. Again, LCC going on the road, taking on the Cougars.
Yeah, and there's a whole host of games, and we're trying to keep this under an hour. Defiance has a nice little tournament where Bowling Green, Anthony Wayne, and Toledo St. Francis are playing for it. But again, we're just kind of breezing through some of these games. We spent a lot of time talking about a lot of great matchups. But just moving on here, remember, you're listening to the Varsity Locker Room podcast with Matt Tabler and Frank Kill. Player of the Week picks this week. They're sponsored, as always, by Henderson Concrete for affordable, high quality concrete services. Trust Henderson Concrete Construction with over 20 years of experience. They deliver reliable, durable results on time, every time. Choose Henderson Concrete Construction for a job done right. Call Adam today for your free estimate at 419-235-1387.
Well, Tabes, you got to see this kid last week twice, Friday and Saturday. And again, I think when we're talking about players of the week, it's so easy, but it's becoming to the point of like, who are our players of the week? And again, I think you should talk about this guy because really you got to see him against great competition.
Well, it was a young man that played. He's been playing now for 3 years, and it feels like he's been playing for 20 years. He's been a staple within the Bearcat program, coach's son. It was a great for him and his brother to experience a 300 victory with his dad, but individual performance-wise, Owen Sensabaugh went for 19 points versus Crestview. He also went 19 points versus Ottoville. So it was a nice sweep, and they have a 5-0 record now. But what I like is he's a great facilitator on the floor. He can pass the ball. He can finish in the paint. When he first started, and you get this with a lot of freshmen, they live and die by the three. They're not much of a threat. And he has become such a great threat. He can finish with his right. He can finish with his left. He handles the ball well, but he's a very good defender. He gets out in passing lanes. He's quick. So congratulations to Owen Sensabaugh for being my player of the week.
And I think we look at Blake Summers from the Bluffton Pirates. He had 31 points against Delphus Jefferson, 21 points against Toledo Woodward. That's 52 points in an entire weekend. That is a great output. And again, I know the blowout against Toledo Woodward, it could have been a whole lot more. And when you don't play the, halfway through the third and fourth quarter because other guys are playing, Blake Summers could have scored a lot more, and he's a guy that does a lot. And we talked about the Pirates at the beginning of the season, with a late start because of football, and here they are. They're only going to get better, and they're only going to get better because a guy like Blake Summers, the things he does inside and out for the Pirates. And I know, Coach Boblet really leans on his players, and especially his experienced players, to really take that next leap. I think Blake Summers is the guy that's going to be able to take that next leap.
Oh, he had a weekend, 52 points, 27.5 out of the gate. That's a great start for a very good Pirate team. All right, who's hot, who's cold? Brought to you by American Heating and Air Conditioning. American Heating and Air Conditioning is dedicated to providing the best possible solution for your home or business. You can count on us to provide you with a system and solution that fits your unique needs. And since we've installed many systems in the area, we've earned a reputation for doing the job right.
All right, who's hot? From the BBC, we got Liberty Benton 5-0, Arlington 6-0. From the MAC, Delphus St. John's at 4-0 and Versailles 3-0. From the Northwest Conference, we got Spencerville 5-0 and Bluffton a hot 2-0. And from the WBL, who is someone kind of that we did not expect to really see on our radar, the Defiance Bulldogs.
Go get them, Coach Brin. Good job.
Man.
And that's interesting to see those teams because, like in the BVC, that Liberty Benton Arlington game, there could be a lot on the line. Same with the Delphos St. John's and Versailles. You say Delphos St. John's is very dominant. We don't know much about Versailles. We know they defend well. We know they made a regional run last year. They got a lot of key pieces back. Then you look in the Northwest Conference. Will Spencerville stay undefeated after having to play LCC this week? And Bluffton, who is only 1-0 in the league, are they going to continue that? And then will that be a great matchup? And then Defiance possibly could be meeting up with Shawnee as they're both undefeated. All right, the cold. And this idea came to me. This idea came to me because I am doing the game against Crestview and Spencerville, and we do our wrap-up show, and we have to walk right by the locker rooms. And as I'm walking down the stairs, I'm just praying, I hope I don't see the losing coach, because I know it was the same for you, Coach. When you lost, it was so devastating. And the older we got, they probably became even more devastating. And I ran into Coach Etzler. And I wasn't going to say anything. I kind of put my head down. He was with his 4 coaches, and you could see the distraught in his face. And he looks at me and says, "Hey, Coach, nice game plan, right?" And I was like, oh, man, I remember those times, beat myself up, what I could have done better to make the kids more successful. And it just flat out sucks. That's all I'm going to say. It sucks.
You could put the greatest game plan together, and what you and I, because we had a lot of experience for many, many years, and so does Doug Etzler, many years of experience from coaching the Columbus area to Crestview. And that the reality is when you put a game plan together and it doesn't plan out the way that you and I expected, it is demoralizing. And that is our cold kind of like segment, because really it's one of those things that you and I have a lot of empathy for other coaches who's been very successful, and you see the defeat on their face
and the time invested. It just feels like, and it doesn't go for nothing, but it feels like it at that time. All right. Over under. You want to read us through this segment?
All right. Our over under is brought to you by CCR Realtors. CCR sets the standard when it comes to local real estate. If you are looking to buy or sell, see agent Jody Cartagena for all your real estate needs. Again, last week, obviously, total season 2-4. Coach Tabes, you're 0-6. But again, these are great statistics. Last week, we said how many PVC games on Friday would be determined by 15 points or less. Over under, we said, 2 was the max. I said 3. You said under. Am I correct?
No. The number was set at 3.
Right.
No, the number was set at 2. You're right. You're right. The answer was 3.
Right.
Because there were 4 games. Ada beat Riverdale. Elmwood. Come on, Macomb. You get beaten overtime. You could have helped a brother out. And Liberty Benton beat Lipstick. So you were victorious on the over on 2. There was 3. Then we went to the WBL, how many wins they would get. We had a mistake. We didn't know Marion Local was playing at Salina. The number was set at 4.5, so we lowered it to 3.5. We still both took the over, and the WBL disappointed us, and we both lost, as Defiance, Shawnee, and Van Wert were the only victors from the WBL. So we both lost that one. The overall rankings, I'm 0-6, as Frank just said, and he's 2-4. All right, let's move on to this week.
So how many home teams in league play, which we have 7, so Salina at Van Wert, Walpock at OG, Columbus Grove at Crestview, Spencerville at LCC, Minster, St. Henry, Arcadia at Macomb, and Elgin at North Baltimore.
Do some halves in here.
We got to go half. Yeah. So even though there's 7, I think we got to go half. So, I mean, I'm going to put the number. You ready for this?
Yeah.
How many home teams win in league play? And I'm going to say 4.5.
I'm going over.
Over?
Yeah.
That's a great number.
Because I had 5.5 in my head, so okay. I have to.
All right, I'll take the under.
Okay. Oh.
How many home teams win in league play?
Okay. All right. Then how many teams are going to sweep this weekend? That means 2 victories. There's 7 teams. Elida, They play Kenton and Perry. Defiance plays St. Mary's and Bowling Green. Shawnee plays Bath and a one-loss Bishop Hartley team who went 22-3 last year. Crestview will play Grove and Kalida. LCC, Spencerville and Van Wert. Fort Jennings will play Ayersville and Lincoln View. And Ada will play Elmwood and Corey Rawson. And I see in my head, I will give you a number.
7 games,
seven teams again. And I see one. I'm going to set the number at 4.5 as well.
I'm going under.
I'm going over.
How many teams sweep the weekend?
Yep. I say 5 of those teams sweep.
Okay. So
my predictions. I mean, you want me to go even further? I'm going to say Lida wins. Defiance wins. Crestview wins.
Shawnee.
Shawnee, yeah, and Ada. Those are the ones I'm counting on.
All right.
I'm
not going to say who it is, but I'm going to let you go with that.
Okay.
So
All right.
There's no bulletin board material for me.
Lead us out, brother.
Once again, we'd like to thank our good friends and our sponsors at the Varsity Locker Room podcast. Frickers of Lima, Stolly Insurance, American Heating and Cooling Conditions, Jody Cartagena of CCR Realtors, Henderson Concrete, Dalton Brenner of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services. Listen to the Varsity Locker Room podcast every Wednesday as we are recapping last week's game and we'll be previewing the upcoming games for the week. Merry Christmas, ladies and gentlemen, and I hope you have a wonderful holidays. Enjoy your family and friends. Until next week, God bless.